Hi YouTube, my name is James and this is Kitchen Table Reviews. I recently did a review of the UniFi Dream Machine Pro. One of the questions that quite a few people have come back and asked is how well UniFi Protect works on it. It's obviously one of the main reasons you would upgrade or go for the UniFi Dream Machine Pro over the standard UDM. So I've got myself a UniFi camera. This particular one is the G3 Flex. It's fairly basic, it's only 1080p, so it's not 4K, but it will hopefully be good enough to take you through how to set up UniFi Protect, what's its basic features, what it can do, and then we will sort of review how well that goes. I'm not going to be able to test 20-30 cameras as I don't have that, so I have to keep an eye out for other YouTubers doing those sort of tests and testing the load. The UniFi Dream Machine obviously does have a SFP Plus port, so it's capable of doing 10 gig networking to a switch, so there shouldn't be any bandwidth holds up there. But yeah, if we open this up and have a look at what's inside this box, what you need to set up the UDM Pro for UniFi Protect, take it from there. So the only additional things you need to make the UniFi Dream Machine Pro be able to run UniFi Protect is a 3.5-inch hard drive. This is one I've got lying around, it's nothing special. Probably recommend going for something like a Western Digital purple surveillance drive and having a sufficient size hard drive depending on what or the number of cameras you've got. The reason I would go for a Western Digital purple is you have only got one drive in the UniFi Dream Machine Pro. It does mean that you've got no RAID or data redundancy, so obviously if losing the footage is an issue for you, the UniFi Dream Machine is not going to be the correct device for you. I would maybe look at something like a Synology NAS running disk station and then setting up a RAID array within the drives that you have. The cameras with UniFi Protect, you are unfortunately linked to just the UniFi cameras. There's a good range of different cameras out there. This is sort of a can do everything. There's many different ways of mounting it, and they do go all the way up to the 4K cameras. This particular camera does have night vision. It's 1080p, so if we open this up and see what's inside of the box, cellophane packaging as normal. Camera is right in the front of the box. You then got plastic mount, quick start guides, the first mounting bracket, the zip or cable ties to go around the pole, and then a couple of other screws and fixtures. So quite basic really, nothing more in the box. So a nice little small camera. You can mount this through a ceiling, so it comes down. The lens itself tilts and you can twist it left and right as well. And then you then have a single RJ45 port, which is at the bottom of the camera. So I'm going to set this up. One of the things I have initially noticed, which was a little bit disappointing, is the hard drive bay that this goes into within the UniFi Dream Machine Pro actually doesn't lock. So it's quite easy just to knock it and pop the drive out. It would have been nice if there was some sort of a locking mechanism, such as the Synology NASs that often have a little plastic key that locks it. Not really so much for security, but just to prevent it from being accidentally ejected. So we'll jump onto the screen and I'll take you through how this is identified in the network. I've got a PoE switch, so I don't need any power over Ethernet injectors or PoE injectors. It'll just go straight into one of my switches and I'll have it pointing out over and outside of my flat. And we will take it from there. So let's jump into setting it up on a computer. Okay, so we're just logging into UniFi OS, two-factor authentication. This is the main page for the Dream Machine Pro. Coming into the settings, we're just going to go down to the application and make sure that UniFi Protect is installed. So we can click install and it will start downloading what we need. But you'll notice it says hard drive is required to run the app. Now, I didn't initially realize this, but in order for the hard drive to be noticed by UniFi, you do need to power cycle the device. So when I came back to general, I was initially expecting it to show the hard disk mounted, but it didn't show it. I decided to reboot the device, so I went over to advanced, just clicked the restart device. It then did a restart, and this is back on the general page. Now when you come back down to disk storage, you can see that it's got it. I've got 491 gigabytes available. So coming back to the applications page, we now no longer have the warning message saying that it can't be started, and it's already started UniFi Protect when it restarted the device. You'll now also see that I've got the Protect icon available in the UDM Pro menu, and this enables us to add the camera. The camera was immediately found, it was pointing at me, so that's my little sort of clip in there. So if you had multiple cameras around the proximity of your house, you'd be able to quickly identify which one was which. So we'll give this a name, just to say that it's a home test. I think I went for simply test in the end. So punch in your name and then click add device. Now at this point it shows it as adopting, but very quickly switched over to updating, so the initial update happens automatically. This took about a minute. I'll quickly fast forward through that. It showed as adopting for about 2 or 3 seconds, and then it was online. So this is about 2.5 minutes or so after, and you'll see that it's given me all the information about the camera from its IP address. One of the things I thought was a bit interesting is the link state was 100 megabits per second. It's not a 1000 gigabit per second connection, but for a single camera, it's not really a problem. You've got a few options on the side to restart or unmanage the camera, very similar to as if it was an access point in the UniFi software. So there's a lot of similarities. Just opening up a live view, so you can see that it's fairly responsive, but this has taken very little setup at all. All the default settings are pretty much jumped in. We'll lift this up to full 1080p. At full screen, and the image quality is quite good. There's a good dynamic range on the camera. I've got some bright lights behind me with not a huge amount of illumination coming in. At this point I've turned the recording lights off as I'm setting this up, but all the settings are available, so it's showing you the bit rate, the MAC address, how long it's been up. So as I said, only a minute as this has just been turned on. But what's quite nice is all the last motion information and everything else. So you can turn the light on and off at the front. If it's externally mounted, I'd probably recommend keeping the light on so people firstly know that they're being recorded, but also just as a general deterrent. Information overlay, this records things like the logo or time, the camera name directly onto the video, so there's no disputing who or what time the footage was recorded. But for the testing purposes, I'm going to lift the frame rate up to 25 frames per second, and I'm going to max out the bit rate. I've only got a single camera, so I'm not going to be using too much memory or storage across the single drive. Motion events, you can play around with some of the settings, and you'll need to fine-tune these to your conditions, depending on where you put these cameras, whether there's trees moving. These will come down to playing around. You can have motion zones, so for example if you had areas that you wanted to block, or default areas say around windows, so if you wanted to make sure that you definitely got a notification if someone was just outside of a window. You can set all of this up. It's really simple. You can have multiple zones as well. So here I am just adding another one. You can add additional points in, but by default you just get the window with the 4. And then you can then customize what notifications you get out. So quite intuitive to use, and my testing showed that these worked quite well. I haven't shown it, but one thing to mention as well is you do also have the privacy zone, which works in exactly the same way as the motion zone, but it just blacks out the area so that you're not recording any of that footage. Quite useful if you've got neighbours, or say your camera's in the yard overlooking someone else's window. Just means that you're not recording anything that you shouldn't be. Finally, in the manage section, you can reset the camera and unmanage it, but you've also got the RTSP settings, so the real-time streaming protocol, and then at the very bottom you've got the microphone. I would probably have the microphone disabled in most cases, but it's down to your local laws about what you want to do. I'm going to test the night vision on the camera, so ignore me talking to myself. I'm just asking Alexa to turn the lights off in my living room. Unfortunately, it doesn't control the cooker hood light behind me, but it switches the infrared camera on quite quickly. So it was picking me up, as you could see in that clip, with the limited light, but it's a lot clearer when you turn on the infrared. It's totally invisible to the naked eye, but if you were using this camera internally in, say, an office, it's more than bright enough to illuminate a room that's pitch black. Talking to myself again just to turn the lights back on, and you'll see that it switches back to full color and turns off the infrared quite quickly. So all in all, quite happy with the performance of the camera. And I will try and do some further testing at some point externally, but that's not going to be for a few months. Just minimizing that again, and as I said, these cameras do come up in their own pop-up windows. It's a really intuitive interface to use, and I've been generally really impressed with it. If you were using this for, say, a few cameras around home, this would be a really viable solution. You can set up video walls, so you just drag the cameras into the location where you want them, and then click save in the top right hand corner, and that will then lock the display or the format of how you want to display your cameras. So again, really useful if you have multiple cameras around and just want them all displayed on one screen. This is how you view recorded footage, so exactly the same sort of format. You can make it full screen or not, and then you have the timeline functionality on the right that shows you motion events in the different zones that you've set up, as I showed earlier, but you can, the bottom right, jump it straight up back to live. Moving back to the panel on the left, we go to events. You can obviously then view them in the time lapse or just download the individual captures or the motion events that it has. Coming down to users, these will be linked to the UDM Pro, but you can set whether they're administrators or just view only. Under accounts, this UDM Pro is linked to me, so this has my UniFi account linked to it, and then last but not least, you've got the settings page. General at the top with the MAC address and the IP address of the UniFi Protect. And then you've got the option to enable automatic backups. Storage and capacity, you've got time-based purging of the data. This might be useful if you've got a business environment where you have a business policy that says you will only hold on to the data for 30 days as an example. This would let you put in 30 days, and even if you had space on your hard drive, it would delete the data after 30 days after it was recorded. You've got backups at the bottom, which I've enabled, so daily backups is absolutely fine, and you can download the backup and store it separately on a different hard disk. This will be settings only, it won't be the footage. You've got the device password, but I got a little bit confused here and it took me a second to realize it, but the menu system on the left where you've got backups, storage and capacity, these are just the headings on the one page, so you can click these and they don't really do anything, but it did take me a little while just to twig that. Ended up refreshing the page thinking it was frozen, but maybe as Ubiquiti add more settings or more features, these will grow or become separate pages. Let's sign out of the UDM Pro, and just before we have a look at the app, let's have a look at the small display on the front of the UDM. So I've got a warning message at the moment. That's because I've got a software update that's required. So just flicking through the other pages, you've got motion events, cameras that are online or offline, retention period for the number of days to record the footage, and then back onto the about page. So I'm just going to do this software update. It took about a minute. It didn't take very long at all. I just triggered it from the app on my phone. Pages are exactly the same. However, what it did go and do is automatically update the G3 Flex camera that I have. So it's now showing everything's up to date, but after we cycle through some of the other menu options, let's have a look at network. So minimal throughput at the moment. And then you can have a look at the Wi-Fi experience, number of clients, first wired and wireless, and the current controller software. But when we go back to the Protect page, it's now got that little warning again. That's because the camera is offline. So it took about a minute and a half until it came back online, which it'll jump on the screen. I'll speed the time up a little bit. But yeah. Before anyone else mentions, yes, I have managed to put a small scratch in the front of the UDM Pro, which is slightly annoying, but I am constantly taking stuff in and out of my rack, trying different things, so it's sort of to be expected. Anyway, let's jump back to the kitchen table and have a look at the UniFi Protect app. Right, so we've had a look at all the controls that are available through the user interface on a computer, but I've got an app on here and I'm recording the screen, so I'll jump up and I'll put the screen over to my side so you can see what I'm talking about. But if we open up the app, it logs into the Dream Machine. Now I've currently got my camera pointing out the window, so the infrared is reflecting off the glass. So it's not really a reflection, but of what it's like at night. It's a bit difficult because I'm inside of an apartment. If you had this externally mounted, you wouldn't have this problem at all. The night vision is actually quite good, and I'll show you some clips taken from when I had it projecting into the actual flat. So the first screen you see is the cameras that you have available. So if you had multiple cameras, these would all be listed. And in the top right, you can basically hide the overlay or show the overlay. This shows the name of the camera and the fact that it last detected motion 35 minutes ago. If you open up the camera, it shows you've got a fast connection. You've got the settings for the camera here, so the name, it's connected via Ethernet, so that's the connection that it's got back to the UDM Pro, and its IP address. I've left the IP address as static. As a DHCP, so I'll let the UDM manage all of that for me. You've got the stream resolution, so there's far more granular control on some of these settings. You've got when to record, so always, never, or if there's motion. I've left the infrared night vision to automatic and it kicks it on and off absolutely fine. I've also left the sensitivity at low. These are all default settings. The picture itself, you can go in, so there's stuff like hue and orientation that you can play with, but for this I've sort of left it all as the factory defaults. Overlay information, I wanted the camera name and the time, but I've taken the logo and the bit rate off, as you don't need those. The microphone is on, you can turn that off. You just come into here and just do permanently disable. But is as an experiment, I think you'd need to be careful what country you were in, whether you're legally allowed to record audio. But as this is only at home between me and my partner, it's not too much of an issue. Under that, you've got the record light, so to let people know whether the camera is active or not. When it's working, quite a good deterrent, but I got that on because that was a default feature, but as you can see, it's as easy as that, just to turn it off, just touching the switch. I haven't set up any motion zones or privacy zones, but if you had a neighbour that you didn't particularly want to view into their garden, for example, you can move these privacy zones around, and what that does is it basically blacks out the area and makes sure that you don't record anything in that zone. Now, that's a really great feature that a lot of basic sort of Wi-Fi and internet cameras that you see don't have. And with GDPR and other regulations about data, you are technically collecting data. So you do need to be careful what you're capturing, how long you're holding the footage for, and what your purpose is, which are all legal requirements under GDPR, which is a data protection law within Europe. So we'll just go back, and it's left that zone in there. So if you wanted to take the zone out, you just do delete privacy zone, and there it comes back out. You've got motion zones, which are very similar, and this is more for the alerts. So if you wanted to cover your driveway or your front door, and then you can build bespoke notifications around what motion happens in these areas. We'll just take that one out for now. And then you've obviously at the very bottom, you can either unmanage or reboot the camera. The algorithm as well for motion is either stable or enhanced. Stable has always been fine through my testing over the last couple of weeks. So yeah, that's all the settings that you've got available within the app. I would say that UniFi Protect is far more geared around the app controlling the whole system as opposed to going in through the pane of glass or the dashboard in the UniFi Dream Machine Pro itself. You do have this nice little timeline. So as I said, this camera's been pointing out the window, and it's got a nice little track out to what's been happening. And as there's motion, the motion just appears in these little segments, these little windows. So as you can see, someone moving a chair outside the window, it picks it up. So it's quite robust, but to save you having to scroll through loads and loads of footage, you can just click the bottom right, which is the motion sensors area, and it will only show you the motion and just basically streamline it through. If you want to go over the big blue button in the middle, just takes you back up to the live recording. And then you've then also got the ability to delete clips, insights, so that's basically what's happening there. But you can export the clip locally onto your phone, you can take photographs, and let's just say for whatever reason I didn't want the last 30 minutes of footage or however long sat on there, you can come down and move this rocker up and down, basically from the start and finish time. So if we just say, what's that, we just drag that down. Let's say we don't want the last 5 minutes of footage on my hard drive. You can just click delete, and that's now removed it from the memory of the UDM Pro. It does give you a little yellow mark, and it does say deleted by user, so it's quite clear that a user has done that. So that's about the camera and the playback. Camera's good quality footage. 1080p is more than enough in most circumstances. It's a small little camera. The infrared on it and night vision's been pretty good. It's quite an easy user interface to use. You can add multiple devices or other NVRs or Dream Machine Pros to this by just doing add device, and it will look for the device and add it in under your UniFi Protect. So you might want to, instead of calling it Dream Machine Pro, you might want to put the address of where that Dream Machine is, just so it doesn't get confusing. But we'll come back into our local Dream Machine. Other settings in here, you can add users. So I've set myself up as an administrator. You can come into your individual role, and it will say whether you're view-only access, and then what devices. So if we just come back on there again, it says I'm currently on site. So it's using the GPS within your phone to identify where you are, and obviously the UDM, you put in your address manually so it knows where it is. To invite users in, it's quite easy. You can either do it just through the email address, just in there, but we'll come back out of there. The roles, you can create custom roles, so what cameras people have got access to. It's all very intuitive to do, but I won't go too granular. And then coming back down, the next one's events. So it just gives you a nice summary of what it's picked up. So yeah, you can filter them down. I imagine that when instead of it just being by camera, you can do it by zone. And then coming down into activity, it shows actually which cameras have been on and off. It looks like quite a lot in here, but I've been messing around with my network and rebooting devices. So you'll notice that a few of these are sort of much shorter times, so within a minute of going on and off. But a lot of that's driven by myself. And then at the bottom, we've got settings. So the alerts, it does push notifications to the app itself, but it can send emails. You can do it to individual users. So at the bottom, you've got your user selection, whether they've arrived or departed from site, and whether the camera is offline or online, or if there's motion. And again, you can come in here and say, right, for this camera, I want to be notified by a push notification whenever there's motion. And if there's updates available, I would like to know about them, and I would like that to be an email and not a push notification. So, or if it's offline, for example. So in this case, I've said if it's offline, I would like a push notification and an email. But if it is just an update, an email is more than enough. I don't need that instant attention grab. When to send, you can, again, when I was saying using your phone's location versus where the UDM thinks it is, you can say I want notifications all the time or only when I'm at home, or you can set up a custom schedule as well with times. So updates, I've had mine turned off just because I like to read the release notes before it automatically updates, but I'm currently on the latest version, which is 1.14.9. And then the controller itself, so within general, you've got the details, the number of days it's been up. So while I've been testing it, it's been 24 days. The name of the device, you've then got the actual location of the device, so I'll blur this out. The physical address, but it integrates into a map, and then you can then increase or decrease the radius at which it thinks that someone is at home or away. The network, it just identifies it's connected via Ethernet, but seeing as your UniFi Dream Machine Pro is actually managing your network in most cases, I have a feeling this might just be related to the future MDR product that's coming up that will run through this app as well. So yeah, a summary of the device itself and how you use it using the app. I've been quite impressed with it actually. It's efficient, it's slick, it's what you need really. It doesn't overcomplicate it. Now, I'm going to do a review that compares this to using a 4K camera, a dome camera, so more traditional type of CCTV camera, running off Synology's disk station. Reason for that is just saying that these cameras are about, the entry-level UniFi cameras are about £70, and they're 1080p. So I want to do a video that compares what can you get for the same amount of money, so the £70, with other manufacturers, and as I've got the Synology NAS, it's a nice comparison between the two. That said, Synology NAS, you only get 3 licenses with the initial device, and then for every additional camera you've got to pay an additional license, which is you own, and you can transfer to different Synologies, but that license is an additional cost. UniFi, there is a premium with the cost of the camera, but there isn't a limit to how many cameras you can add to UniFi Protect, albeit you start hitting performance restrictions, and with the UniFi Dream Machine you only have a single hard drive, so that is a performance limiter in itself, just in the cost of buying a large hard drive that has, say, 5-10 terabytes worth of storage, versus being able to buy some cheaper hard drives at around the 2 terabyte mark, maybe not as robust like the Western Digital Purples, but you've got some redundancy in a RAID if you've got multiple hard drives. So lots of things to think about, but that's another video. If you are looking for something to run your network that can also do CCTV and you've only got a few cameras at home, the UniFi Dream Machine Pro is a good solution. Definitely worth upgrading from the UDM or the basic UDM to go to the Pro if you're looking at doing CCTV as well and you don't already have the Synology NAS. But I will dig into that in a future video. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this was interesting. If you've liked the video, hit the like button. It does really help this video get distributed to other people to view, and the subscribe button as well really helps grow the channel. So thanks again and look forward to seeing you on the next video.